Our next speaker, I'm actually really thrilled that she is here. She has an incredible background. She was the founder of Zipcar, which is a company that just kind of blew up in the US, a couple countries around the world. She can give us the details on that. But she's now come to Europe and, of all countries, France, to launch her next venture. So if you guys could give a round of applause to Robin Chase. Hey, Robin.
Hello.
So I'm thrilled that you could be here. Why don't you actually start by telling us a little bit more about your background, what happened with Zipcar, where did it grow to, just for people who may not know the whole story.
This is a story I know well. So 12 years ago, I co-founded Zipcar, which, for those of you who don't know, it buys cars and parks them throughout dense metropolitan areas for people to use by the hour and by the day instead of owning their own cars. The magic of what we did was that we made using a personal car as easy and convenient as using your own car. And we did that through putting a box into every car and really lovely branding. And the irony of, just as we're sitting here in Paris, is that this is a concept that really is from Europe. And when I was raising money in 1999, my co-founder had seen car sharing happening in Berlin, came back to the US and said, what do you think? And why it's amusing to me is when I was raising this money, the American investors would say, oh, that's something that they'll do in Europe. They'll never do that in the US. We Americans love our car. Those Europeans, they can do it. And now, a dozen years later, people tell me, oh, car sharing, that's something that they do in the US. You Americans don't understand. We French, we really love our cars. It will never happen here. So it's amusing to me.
And so tell us about the growth of the company.
So then keep going. So we launched it in June of 2000, and I want to say that it worked from the first day. It was a very exciting expansion, although when we compare it to pure technology companies, it doesn't grow at that pace at all. So month over month, we had 7 to 21% growth month over month. I led it for 3 years, expanded into Washington, D.C., and just to put you, this is like the way back times. So we launched in D.C. September 1st, 2001, and promptly had the calamity of September 11th. And what was amazing from our perspective was I remember writing my board members, emailing them in the beginning of October and saying, do you see, this company really is infrastructure. This is a utility, just like water, that the entire travel and car rental industry had been decimated, and we continued to grow through September and October. I launched it in New York City in February of 2002, opened up some universities, and left in the beginning of 2003 as CEO, stayed on the board a couple more years, and then went on to have a lovely fellowship at Harvard, which is, I have to say, everyone's dream. I didn't know it was a dream. It turned out to be a dream. To be paid to do whatever you want for a year with a nice title behind your name is just like a treat. And then I started a company that is similar to BlaBlaCar in the US called GoLoco. And this would be in 2007. And the idea was to do exactly what Fred Mazzella accomplished here, which is to leverage social networking and what you can do with technology and real-time messaging and cell phones, nice mapping, to make ride-sharing work in the US. After a couple years, I realized that it was not time for the US. And I have to say, I still feel good about that, because now it's 3 years or 4 years since I stopped investing in GoLoco, and no one in the US has succeeded yet. I think ride-sharing will one day be something that is absolutely everywhere. It's not clear the U.S. is.
Do you have any
right
thoughts
yet.
as to why that is? Is it just the market and the culture?
It's the way cities are built in the U.S. And if we think about what I'm trying to keep saying BlaBlaCar, Nicholas. So if we think about BlaBlaCar, who is using that service is people as riders, people who were buying train tickets or bus tickets, and this was much cheaper. In the US, no one is buying trains or bus tickets. They're driving themselves. And so the competitive and price differential is not as large for them. And So it's just not that much cheaper than driving yourself. And people own cars, and so they drive themselves. I think one day it will absolutely be the case. And then I started thinking about and working on this idea of what I'm doing today, which is Buzzcar. And Buzzcar is car rental and car sharing using individuals' own cars. So when I was doing Zipcar, and for many, many years after that, people would ask me all the time, how come you didn't put a car downstairs in my building? How come there isn't one in my neighborhood? How come there isn't one in my city or my small town? And the reason is that we needed to get a return on investment. So Zipcar would place its cars, and does place its cars, very carefully because it needs to get enough money per month, enough usage per month. So when we're using other people's cars, their excess capacity, we don't have to get a return on investment. That car has already been bought, paid for, maintained, parked for their own personal use, which happens to be about 5% of the time, nothing much. And so it's free and available all those other times. And therefore we can have cars anywhere that there's car sharing. The piece that I love about Buzzcar is that it empowers individuals. So if you want to share your car, it takes 5 minutes. You go to the website, you add the car to the network, you take photos of it, done. And if you want to share someone else's car, you could go find them. And it takes, as I said, and it's effortless. So I can tell what the next question is going to be, which is, why did I start in France?
Yes, you can see it.
So this leads in. I can see it coming through.
Yeah, tell us first why you came to France, and then a bit about your experience as an American entrepreneur here.
Right. So the reason I came to France, which was where I was just going, is I say that there is a transportation conversation going on in France, even though people don't realize it overtly. So there's BlaBlaCar that's been having great success. It has a lot of members, so there's a lot of people who are thinking about the costs of travel and are traveling differently. Bike sharing, Vélib famously, but as we know, in cities throughout France, has been really successful over the last 4 years. And there is car sharing in pockets, but Autolib that was coming and had been talked about, everyone across France has heard about Autolib. How much does it cost? A lot. What is its purpose? And I wanted to be able to have Buzzcar in that reflection, to say that Autolib is going to cost, I think, 65 million euros a year for quite a while and lose a lot of money. It's taken years and years to come into place. Or you could have Buzzcar, which takes 5 minutes to add your car at no cost, and you have environmental benefits instantly. So I wanted to be in that conversation.
And you felt that it was really happening more in France than anywhere else.
Absolutely. So if we think about where the future of transportation is going, France is closer to that future than the US is. So the future will be, we say, multimodal. So people will be using different types of transportation depending on where they're going, and not just one way, which is cars in the US. And so France is much more to that end. And thinking again about Buzzcar coming to a place like France, what we needed a lot of was people who own cars but don't use them very much because they don't need a car to get to work, and a lot of people who don't own cars because they don't need them to get to work but would like to have them a little bit. So going towards this future, which is what I did with Zipcar and what I'm doing with Buzzcar, is the old-fashioned way of using a car is that you have to own it or you don't own it. It's very binary. You have 100% or 0%. And what Zipcar enabled and what Buzzcar does even more is that I, as a car owner, can now have 82% of a car, and I, as a individual, can have 5% or 10% of a car. So it allows us to transition to a place where we only pay for what we use and only buy what we need.
Okay, and so you said that you feel like France is really leading the way, essentially, in terms of where transportation's going. Why do you think that is?
I was just last week, I was at TED in Edinburgh, and I'm going to tell you my new answer to this question, and maybe it's true, so maybe it's true. If we think about France in its history, I think Paris was the largest center of car manufacturing anywhere in the world around the turn of the previous century, around 1900. So I think it was the largest one. If we think of aviation, France was a leader in aviation. France is well known for its subways, for its and trains. And so it could be that France does have transportation in its DNA. I'm asking you. It sounds good, doesn't it?
It does sound good. And so, leaving the transportation conversation aside for a second, tell me what it's been like, and be completely honest about, what has been, a huge challenge as an American trying to open a business in France, what you've liked, what you've not liked. Just kind of give me the rundown. I know some of your personal stories already.
So I laughed that the thing that was most striking to me was not starting the business, but being a human being entering Paris. And you guys will laugh at this, that in order to get an apartment, in order to get a cell phone, in order to get internet access, in order to open a bank, I had to have an apartment, and I had to have a cell phone, and I had to have internet access, and I had to have a bank. And there was this circle that went around and around and around, and it was the most frustrating, stressful. And I kept thinking that people in France clearly don't understand that, because they're born and then they live someplace, and then when they're 12 they get a phone, and then when they're 18 they get a bank account, that they don't realize that if you don't have one you can't get the others. So it was really painful. And I also thought maybe this is what it's like to be an immigrant in any country. So my challenge here is maybe what's felt by people going to the US. And I think, of course, that you can open a bank account in the US in 2 hours, where it took 4.5 months here. But wow. Maybe I'm wrong. So that for me was the most striking, painful, horrible experience. So to do that while I was also trying to start a company. It's very hard to start a company without internet access and without a telephone, let me tell you. So once all those things got organized, the business perspective. Curiously, insurance, it took me 1.5 years to get insurance for Buzzcar here. And to tell you, so for Buzzcar, we protect the owner's driving history and their car during the rental period. So during the rental period, it's our insurance that takes over. But we needed to get an insurance that was 100% variable, that you needed to be able to add your car and it would be insured only during reservations. I didn't want you to have to pay 400 euros and then start renting your car. So it had to be 100% variable. And we needed to make sure that for drivers, that the deductible, la franchise, was low enough that it was interesting, and provide 24-hour roadside assistance. So in France, it took me 1.5 years. In the US, I had been working at it for 4 years, and still it's not finished yet. So that was a very positive difference, that in France it was less horrible and difficult than it was in the US. I would say that I've been really impressed with the innovation and the technology startup ecosystem that's happening here in Paris. It's lively, and you would agree.
I, of course, agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, things are happening. I don't feel in any way that it's that it's not thriving, that it's doing really well.
So essentially, you feel that you've been able to accomplish all that you thought that you would be able to here so far, but nothing's really missing from France.
I would say one interesting thing, and for me this is a kind of a quandary that I don't know quite how I feel about it, is the data privacy and the CNIL, that I care a lot about privacy. It's something, data privacy, it's something I really lobby for in the United States, that we need to do a better job of it. Here, however, I think it's a little bit too harsh, that it's a little too strict, and so there's a lot of things that I think are natural, that I think people want to have provided for them, that the CNIL prevents you from providing. And so that's curious to me, that there's a certain lockdown that's a little too low down, that makes it
so the privacy protection, all that kind of essentially blocks you almost from innovating sometimes.
It doesn't, and I feel anxious about saying that, because I care a lot about it, and I think France is doing a better job than the US. But what would
you give an example?
Yeah,
maybe?
So I'm thinking of an example that. So back to driving. An example. In the United States, my personal driving history is automated. It's in a computer somewhere. And actually, it is here in France, too, because if you get stopped when speeding, you know that they know how many points you have, and they yell at you. So it is electronic and live. In this country, so in the U.S., certain insurance companies, if they follow all these privacy rules, and if you as a driver say, yes, you can check my background, they're allowed to go in and check your background. And I want to say it's a difficult thing, but I can do it, and I can do it in real time. In 10 seconds, I can know if you're a good driver or a bad driver. In France, no one except the police can do that. Even you yourself personally, if you say, I want to know what my points are, you should go online and try it. So you go online, you write a letter, then you do some things, you print it out, you mail it to the post office, it goes someplace, 3 weeks later, they go there, you go, it's a crazy 2-month process. I was talking to someone who said that they tried to have a minor accident so the police would tell them how many points they had, because that's the fastest way. But if you just think about that we as individuals own our data, and we should be able to give it to someone, to companies that we choose. And here, when I talk to the French government, they say, oh, but then if you're a bad driver, then people could find out. And I thought, yeah, if I want to tell you I'm a bad driver, that's okay. And if I want to tell you I'm a good driver, better yet. But right now, everyone is paying a higher insurance level because you can't know.
So that actually affects your product in the end.
It does.
So we're almost at the end. We're going to take questions in like 1 second. But before we do, I wanted to actually have you comment a little bit on what you guys are doing in mobile, because aside from just innovating in the fact that now I can rent my neighbor's car when they're not using it, you're doing some really interesting things in tech. Do you want to talk about that?
It was so exciting to develop an app. To develop the app was really a fun thing, because if you think about what we know, which is that the smartphone can be used to do data entry, and then it can turn into a telephone, and then it can turn into a camera instantly. And so what was lovely is when people add their cars, they're filling out a form on the phone, and then it says, add a photo of my car, and you push the button, it turns into a camera. You take the picture of your car. It puts it right into the form in the right spot, and it turns back into forms. And it's a really remarkable, there's nothing else that can be so quick and easy. So it's really lovely. And for us, also with the walking around, doing a walk around of the car when you're renting it, it's the same idea. I can have my phone that says, here's the bumps that the owner has listed on this car, and I walk around. And if I see something that is new, I take a photo, I send it, and now it's time-stamped and geolocated. I wasn't in the car, and it goes instantly. And so it's all the hard work is done just by me taking the photo and sending it, that I have the timestamp and the location quickly. So there are these fabulous things that you can do with the beauty of the smartphone that you couldn't otherwise, that would be hard and tedious and require 2 people. And
I used to think Zipcar was so easy. This sounds even more simple than that.
It's cool, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We have time for 1 or 2 quick questions. If anybody has a question they'd like to ask Robin, don't be shy. We have one in the back. If you could put your hand up, please. And maybe introduce yourself as well.
Okay, my name is Jérôme Larose. I represent Time is Life company, creators of information system tools. And my first question is, at the beginning, did you have enough funds to develop your company? And when you come to Europe, did you have some difficulties to adapt your concepts? Did you have to convince main stakeholders to develop your concept in Europe?
So the question is around engineers for design? What?
First one was about funding. Right?
Funding? Sorry, I missed the word funding. So actually, that would be another reason that I was in France, that I really, really did not want to have venture financing for my A round, because I wanted to have more control, and I didn't want to deal with them. And so I came to France. My financial partner is a company that you guys would know as Noroto, that renamed as Mobivia, and then renamed again as Via ID. as they go move up. But what was really nice about it is it's a privately held family company, and they share my values in many, many ways. And so our relationship has been a really wonderful one. And that's what I wanted. There are pros and cons to that, but I was really not interested in taking a venture rounds too early. And if you manage to talk one-on-one with people who have just had their a large venture round, maybe 2 months behind them, they will tell you how it changes the whole game. That now you are, as an entrepreneur, even though you might still be a majority shareholder, your ability to operate is dramatically changed. So I really wanted to avoid that. And the second part of your question was?
Did you have a second question?
Or was that? No.
To adapting the concept?
When you found your company at the beginning, was it difficult to get the money needed to develop your concept? And if you think that in France you do the same processes, what were the main differences?
But this is about funding, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we kind of went over that a bit.
Yeah, I think the funding here is different, but I would say I'm not a good source of understanding for that, since I actually only dealt with one. So I'm not good at that.
Hope that answers your question. Yeah. Does anybody else have a question that they'd like to ask? An American entrepreneur, yep.
Hi, I'm Thierry Beau. I'm owning a human resources consulting company in Paris. But I would like to understand, what is your business model? How do you invoice the user, and how do you, I would say, pay the owner?
Thank you. I should have said that before. How we take a 15% fee on top of the total bill, and we broker the money between the two parties so that owners don't have to chase the money. We get it before someone started renting. 15%, and that includes the transaction charges. And I look at that and I feel like it's so little that it's really hard it's going to have a significant scale to do that. If a person found their own driver or their own owner, then it's 10%. So so it's 10% plus a 5% marketing fee, I would say. And I do not worry about people changing money, getting to know each other and changing money without us involved because of the insurance. No one wants someone to drive their car without the insurance, and it needs to come through us to get the insurance bought. And the insurance is on top of that.
Great. So we have time for one last question, if anyone has something they want to ask. No? Thank you, Robin.
You're welcome.